Hi, folks. Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Ask the Expert session for compliance. We are going to be going through a little bit of intros. Thank you very much. We have a bit of a technical problem right now, so we're working through that. What we have today for you here is a great set of experts to go through and ask some questions. We're going to try to spend a majority of time with them asking these questions. So please go through and ask through our Teams live events portal, and we will come to you with a lot more information here soon. So just so you know, this session may be recorded, so please stick away from any sort of inappropriate comments or chat, and really just follow our overall Microsoft Code of Conduct. This is our Code of Conduct if you need to see this, but please just use your best behavior in our session here. And like to introduce each of our experts here from left to right.
Hi, I'm Joseph Davis. I'm a Chief Security Advisor for Microsoft US Healthcare, and I've been a CISO twice over, and hopefully I can impart some of my experience to the customers.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Mark McIntyre. I'm a peer of Joseph. We're both on the same team, Security Solutions area. And I focus on public sector customers in the United States, US government and some state and local government customers. Been Microsoft about 13.5 years. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ryan Compton. I'm a product marketing manager for our compliance go-to-market team, focusing on business readiness for our field. I've been with Microsoft for about 10 years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mali Mangala, and I'm part of the compliance product marketing team as well.
Hi, my name is Enrique Sagesse. I'm a principal program manager with the Microsoft Information Protection, Compliance, and Security Customer Experience team. We also have Mavi, who's not in the slide. She leads that team. I'll let her introduce herself if she's around.
Thank you, Enrique. Hey, everyone. My name is Mavi, and I lead the MIP Compliance team. Great.
Thanks, everyone. And also, we have here a couple moderators. My name is Kevin Kirkpatrick. I work on a compliance readiness lead on the security compliance team, and we're working with Wayne Anderson as well, who's a security and compliance workshop. Security and compliance architect here with the Microsoft 365 Center of Excellence. So let's get to some great questions we've already seen kind of posted here. So first one here, Molly, we've got a great question here on app connectors. Within the Microsoft 365 app connectors, when you're identifying a source to search against or place on hold, what location do the new data what location when data is flowing in from app connectors fall within here? So thinking about like for WhatsApp data and such, what can we do in these situations?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. And we also have Hamad here who leads our ecosystem plan. So Hamad, feel free to jump in as well. So on the connectors, what we do is basically we match the user, if we can find a match, to the existing Microsoft 365 users. So things like WhatsApp, Slack, etc. We do the matching through the configuration process that we go through for each of the connectors. And when that happens, then the data basically resides in essentially the inbox, literally, of the user. So that is how we basically search it. And if we are unable to find a match, then it becomes much more of a tenant level match that we use throughout the compliance solutions. Hamad, would you add anything else to that?
Yeah, normally, I think you answered it. Just one more, adding a little bit more color to that. Some of these connectors, as you know, they're built by third party. They allow you to do mapping from the user to the user inbox. sometimes there may not be a one-to-one mapping. So there's a mechanism that allows you to do cross mapping of saying user X belongs to identity Y, and then data comes in and sits in the mailbox for identity Y under Microsoft 365. And also just to extrapolate that a little bit so you can visualize the scenario, once the data lands in the inbox, then you can start using any of our compliance solutions and just start using the data and it's there. You can use it in any compliance solution. Back to you. Thank you.
Excellent. So hopefully you can hear me now. Sorry for the technical issues getting started there. Joseph, one of the questions that we're seeing right now is around flows. And can you kind of highlight for us some of the things that an organization should be looking at when flows are touching data that's stored in different systems, kind of this no-code integration? What are some of the things that are top of mind for you?
Yeah, I would think many of those flows really need to be put through the same governance that secure development lifecycle would need to be put through. I would treat it as any other application with versioning, etc., especially if the data is considered sensitive. It's with flows, you have the ability to take data and really land it anywhere and take action on it, obviously. But so not only are you going to be looking at doing security testing around those flows to make sure that there are no loopholes in the flow, you're also going to be ensuring that the data owners or data stewards are on board with what you're doing with that data.
Excellent. Mark, working with federal customers, is there anything that you'd add that's maybe specific to the government context to also think about?
Thanks. I'll echo what Joseph said. There'd be some nuances, I guess, in some of the mechanics, some of the compliance scenarios that government customers are working under, with some, let's say, some other dependencies around what particular capabilities might actually exist in the tools. There's a bit of a feature gap currently between a lot of what's commercially available at Microsoft and some of what's available to the government. It's closing, which is great news. So the dependencies really not, say that any discrepancies or dependencies are not on what the customer has to do. It's more on just making sure that those are available to do within the government cloud regions.
Excellent. So wonderful. Mavi, one of the questions that we're getting right now is around information protection, auto labeling. This is a great new feature. Organizations have been able to apply it to find really hard to find things like resumes and contracts. But organizations have a lot of data available. And so one of those folks that are joining us is asking, look, there are 10 OneDrive users per policy. It's something that an organization has to consider with it when they deploy. What are some of the things that are driving that limitation, and how are we thinking about expansion?
Mavi, you're on mute.
Mavi, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. So that's a great question, and thank you for that. Yes, we are aware of the 10 sites limitation, and mainly this is because we're just rolling out, and just remember this is a new capability that we released. These are baby steps that we're taking. We're trying to understand our customers' requirements, what do they need, and in time we will increase it. I just want to note that there is an option today to increase these 10 limits by opening a support ticket, and we can do that in the background. Enrique, you want to add on top of that, or?
Yes, I wanted to add that the limits are still being worked on, but the intent is to essentially for the OneDrive case to remove any limitation that could be significant. For SharePoint sites, there is a possibility that we will maintain limits and increase them over time, given that there is always a risk of essentially shooting yourself in the foot when you have a company with thousands of sites. If you configure a policy incorrectly, you could end up blocking the whole company out of the data. So we want to give, as Mavi said, baby steps in ensuring that these limits are responsibly increased to avoid any kind of major outages or issues.
And yeah, and just to point out that if there is a specific customer who wants to add more evidence on the requirements and that they need more than 10 sites, please let us know so we can take that with the engineering team.
Molly, I've got a great question that I think I want to go to you for here. What is some of the feedback that we're seeing from across our customer base on information protection and governance? What are some of the things that are top of mind for you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Wayne. I think we hear that our vision of a comprehensive and unified information protection solution that scales to a customer's hybrid environment is really kind of resonating, and that's what customers want, really. Customers also tell us that the built-in protection capabilities for core workloads like Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, etc., are of high interest, and it is exactly what is needed. Customers also tell us that, especially in the remote environment that we are operating today, things like Teams DLP are extremely critical, and we've seen the usage of that grow exponentially as well over the last couple of months. Customers also, on the flip side, tell us that they're somewhat confused by Azure Information Protection and Microsoft Information Protection, for example. And we also hear the need to improve accuracy, for example, of classification and the need for more built-in sensitive information types. So I would say this is a brief summary of the feedback that we hear on information protection and governance. And I think part B of your question, Wayne, I think was what I'm kind of excited and what I'm looking forward to in IP&G. I think if I just think about it, this was a stunning stat that I saw that only 3% on an average of enterprises' sensitive data is actually protected, and 80% of corporate data is basically dark, which is neither classified, governed, or protected. That's quite stunning, and I'm really kind of excited about the impact our technology can have to remedy this situation.
Excellent. Mavi, I'd like to go back to you with one of the questions that we're seeing now from our audience. Are there any plans to allow for multiple data classification labels? So for example, out in an organization, you could have a document that falls into a certain category of PII, but it could also be maybe financially relevant, or it could have liability for the organization. And so there's a separate tag or a separate category you also want to apply.
Yes, this is a requirement that we've heard over the years from a lot of customers. We call it multitagging. We are working on that. I don't think we yet can provide any commitment or any estimated timelines about this. This is a big feature that we're working on in order to support all these use cases that you just mentioned. I know that Enrique from my team is leading that specific feature request, actually. Enrique, do you have more timelines? I don't think so.
We don't have timelines yet because it's a huge effort. It's actually a little bit more ambitious than just multi-tagging because we want to be able to enforce access controls based on combinations of different tags and essentially use attributes of the user, the organization, the device, the department, and matching. For example, you can only access a document that is under NDA if you do have an NDA signed and you're a member of the same project for which the document is tagged. Those kinds of relationships are complex, and we want that to be pervasive across multiple solutions. So it's a big effort. You're going to hear a lot about it, but not yet. We don't have much to share other than we started building prototypes and working on the initial implementations, but there's still a lot of work to do. In the meantime, what we do recommend is not to use labels to specify exactly what's in the document, but basically it's sensitivity. And typically what we see is that labels are used to specify the sensitivity of the content, and sub-labels are typically used to handle more nuanced scenarios, such as whether the content is internal or external, or if for a specific department or things like that. And when it comes to differentiating between different types of content, just add those types of content to the rules that are enforcing access, like DLP. So you could have a rule that says, if the content is confidential external, but it contains more than 500 credit card numbers, then it's going to be blocked. That kind of rule still works, so you don't strictly need to differentiate different types of content in the label itself. But we do see the value of that because it really creates an abstraction that simplifies a lot of scenarios. And it also helps the users understand what's in the document without having to read the whole thing. So we will be investing a lot in that area. It's a huge thing for Microsoft, but not there yet. Learning how to use the current model is critical for a successful labeling deployment.
Excellent. And Enrique, while we're talking with you, I've got another question that I think you can really help us with. Communication compliance, finding code of conduct issues in the organization. Does communication compliance support detection of foul language in emails, for example, on Exchange Online?
Yes, communication compliance uses our classifiers. The pre-trained classifiers for foul language, for example, come already trained in English, and those can be applied across different solutions. You can also use your own custom trainable classifiers, and also the communication compliance solution can use different labels and sensitive information types and different things, and the combination of the different solutions offers a more comprehensive approach than just using the foul language in some cases, especially when it comes to email, where you may have different requirements because you may have attachments, you may have different situations, and including labels that might tell you that, yeah, these might contain foul language, but it's, for example, a report for a communication by an employee, so you should not block that one because it's about the foul language itself. Normally in email, you will not want to just use a classifier. You will want to use the whole set of controls.
Excellent. Hamad, joining us, you've really focused on the Microsoft 365 ecosystem and the extensibility that wraps around many of the service APIs. One of the questions that we saw coming out of today's keynote on security, compliance, and identity really revolved around the role of connectors. And we saw a lot of questions around licensing of connectors, things like that. Could you talk for a few minutes about maybe the couple of highlights that really jump out at you on what we're doing with connectors and how that's unlocking more value around Microsoft 365? Oh, you're on mute.
All right, that was my bingo card for you're on mute. Thank you. A great question. Love it. So let me paint a little bit of a picture of what we're doing and what's the value we're trying to bring, right? We hear from customers that they want to be able to reason over not just Microsoft data, which is always available from our solution and capabilities perspective, but also on non-Microsoft data. And back to Molly's point of, hey, 80% of the data is dark. How do we make sure that we allow our customers to reason over non-Microsoft data? And that's where really the power of connector shines, because what we've done here is that we've created a connector gallery, a catalog that allows you to use built-in connectors that allow high fidelity ingestion of data from third-party sources. And these are not the connectors that just Microsoft has built, but we've kind of opened up for partners to come in and build those connectors. So now you have about 25 built-in connectors that allowing a pipeline high fidelity data ingestion coming in from a variety of sources, from Facebook to Twitter to Slack to Zoom to WebEx, you name it. There's a data connector for that. Now, and once that data comes in, now the data is part of M365 platform, and you can reason over it from various compliance solutions. Our partnership with the likes of GlobalNet and Telemessage has enabled that, and you will see that space continue to evolve over the next several months as well.
Excellent. Mavi and Enrique, I'd love to maybe talk for a minute. One of the questions that we have is around AI services and SharePoint. There's a lot of thought that's going on around, how do we add intelligence to the way that we recognize content in the enterprise? What are some of the ways that we're using machine learning today, and what's the next step for intelligence in DLP and classification?
I don't know how I get muted all the time, but yeah. So today we are actually using machine learning and trainable classifiers to train our system to identify sensitive information. These are used also in a feedback loop, so we can actually retrain again and again our trainable classifiers. We have out-of-the-box data sets that customers can use that today we have resume, offensive language, source code, etc. But also customers can add their own and train the system in order to identify sensitive information. We are extending these capabilities and we're building more and more robust solution for that.
I see. Enrique, could I ask you to maybe add to that?
Yes. Trainable classifiers is one method for using artificial intelligence and machine learning to identify sensitive data. And that's probably the easy one because you just dump a bunch of sample documents. We do some statistical analysis to detect correlation in the language that those documents have. And then we use that model to detect documents that agree with those patterns. And then we have the ability to continuously train the content that's available today in preview in communication compliance. We plan to extend that to also sensitivity labeling by when you, for example, the system detects a document, it says this is a contract, and you say, no, this is not a contract. I know it looks like a contract, but it isn't. You flag it as something else. And then that feeds back into the model to continuously train the system. That one is not yet available, but that's what we're going to be doing with this feedback loop. There are other models for content identification based on machine learning. One of them that you'll see a lot during Ignite is Project Cortex, or I think it got renamed, but they don't remember the new name, but essentially is a new model for using language analytics to discover patterns. And it centers more about discovering topics rather than talking about the sensitivity of a document. It's more talking about, for example, this is about Project X. This is about a new initiative. This is about this merger and acquisition, and essentially bucketize the data. And you can use that also for classification. It connects with our classification platform. Finally, there is ongoing work. This is not yet available in preview, but there is ongoing work in using natural language processing and what's called named entities, and essentially the ability to recognize entities or terms based on the context, and essentially saying this looks like a person, this looks like a location. And using those for auto classification is a little bit more difficult because just because something mentions a person is not necessarily something that is confidential, but it can help in especially in avoiding false positives. For example, if you are detecting PII but not talking about a person, if you're talking about something like looks like an acquisition but not talking about a company, or medical condition but there's no medical condition referred, that kind of thing can be extremely useful. So we don't see it as a single thing that's going to say intelligently label this document or something like that, or protect this document. More about using the combination of language analytics, heuristics, and language processing, natural language processing to and combine it with all the other capabilities that we have, like exact data match and sensitive information types, etc., to be able to properly identify sensitive data and classify.
Excellent.
Hey, very
Thank you so
quickly
much.
jumping in there. Sorry,
Please.
Wayne. I think the Project Cortex that Enrique was referring to, it's now called SharePoint Syntax, just for the benefit of everyone.
Excellent. Thank you. Speaking of which, Molly, one of the questions that we have here is, look, a lot of the advanced classification features are at kind of that E5 level. I've got E3. What can I do? What steps are available to me to get some of these things that I need for my organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was April 1st of this year, we launched actually what we call as the add-on SKUs. So we launched 3 of them specifically: an information protection and governance add-on SKU, an insider risk management add-on SKU, and then an e-discovery and audit add-on SKU. So for customers exactly in the scenario that you just described, you don't have to purchase all of the entire suite of E5 compliance. For example, if you're only looking for specific areas, you can actually, if you're an E3 customer, you can actually get these add-on SKUs as well.
Excellent. Mavi, I'd like to come back to you. There's a great question here around DLP and connectors. Will DLP work with connectors to prevent scraping of sensitive data or transferring data to a third-party service?
Well, thank you for bringing this up. Actually, we're going to announce a public preview of integrating with MCAS to work on non-Microsoft app integration with our new endpoint DLP. This public preview will be available to all our customers in about 2 or 3 weeks time frame, and they can then, when they configure their data loss prevention policy, they can actually go ahead and also configure non-Microsoft apps using the Microsoft Cloud App Security connectors.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Joseph, I'd love to ask you, DLP, MCAS, the integration, endpoint DLP, what's the relevance of DLP in healthcare right now? Is it a critical technology, or can you do simply rules and policies in a cloud tenant?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical, and it helps users not become victims of their own multitasking, if you will. So with MCAS, with the built-in DLP and MCAS, you can absolutely keep track of what users are sending, where they're sending, where they're landing data, etc. And by victims of their multitasking, what I mean is there have been a lot of data exposures through users, attaching large spreadsheets or medical health records to email and sending them out. These are HIPAA violations, but most healthcare organizations, up until this point anyway, the way they work is that they're constantly auditing, but they don't necessarily always block. Meaning that if you're a badged employee, you have access to medical records. And if you have access to medical records, you're supposed to follow the rules. But sometimes accidents happen, right? So what MCAS and DLP will do, or DLP within Office 365, is just basically help keep track of what's going where. And you don't necessarily have to have a label on the data for the user on the endpoint to get notified that the data might be sensitive and they shouldn't be sending it, so they can make a decision before they hit that send button.
Fantastic. So just to wrap up real quick as we come to the end of our time, and we'll answer more Q&A over the next several minutes. Make sure that you check out the learning paths, tune into the other sessions for the announcements coming on insider protection, preview of compliance manager, and many other subjects. And join us throughout the next several days of Ignite. Plenty of content to come. Thank you for joining us.